And to give us a little bit of what's happening in California, following Swalwell's announcement that he's stepping down from Congress but also not going to take part in that gubernatorial primary, is the Center Square's California reporter Madeline Shannon. Maddie, thanks for taking time with us. Incredible news coming out of California. I'm sure you're hearing all kinds and getting all kinds of news releases from other California legislators and members of Congress. What's the tone that you're hearing from elected officials over there?
Well, so far, I've heard a couple of responses from people who are just generally really surprised at the allegations against Swalwell. But so far, because his announcement that he's going to resign from Congress was just issued yesterday, they really don't know how that's going to play out. We know that his resignation wasn't effective immediately. He is still in his seat in Congress, but we just don't know how long that he's going to be there. Of course, they know that the June 2nd primary race is still going to have his name on the ballot. So we will see how this all plays out in the coming weeks.
Yeah, and what does that mean for voters? How are they going to, react to this? You think? I mean, if you've got a name on there and the person is no longer in the race, does that help or hurt another candidate over a different one? What are Democrat voters, at least in that gubernatorial primary, looking at?
I think a lot of people are going to be probably confused that his name is still on the ballot, even though he's not in the race. And I do see that it could hurt another Democratic candidate that the California Democratic Party could put forward in the next couple of months. Because, of course, we are less than 60 days away from that primary. And it's going to be kind of an interesting one this year for sure.
Maddie, clearly you've got a lot of issues in California that both sides of the aisle are taking a look at, from spending to taxation to crime and public safety and so on. You recently attended a Republican-focused convention. Tell us what some of the issues involving taxpayers were during that convention.
So I got to attend the California Republican Party's annual convention just this past weekend in San Diego. And a number of Republican lawmakers I spoke to there told me that they're really focused on issues that their constituents are talking about and issues that are the focus of legislation introduced in the California legislature this year. Some of those issues affect affordability, income taxes, California's high tax burden, the gas tax, because of course we're seeing gas taxes go up, or gas prices go up rather, here in California. We're also hearing a lot about what legislators want to do regarding affordable housing, because housing is becoming increasingly unaffordable out here in California. And I talked to a few lawmakers about what they want to see from Prop 36 funding, which is a public safety measure that California voters passed in 2024, but that Governor Newsom hasn't allocated much, if any, funding to. This year, he didn't allocate any money towards funding Prop 36 in his budget. And Republican lawmakers, at least, want to see him allocate some money to that. And one lawmaker introduced a bill this year that would allocate about $400 million of taxpayer money towards enforcing Prop 36, which elevates some drug-related crimes from misdemeanors to felonies. And I got to speak with Assemblyman David Tonkiba, whose name is on the complaint for the Prop 50 lawsuit, about the Prop 50 lawsuit being consolidated recently with a similar lawsuit, Noyes versus Newsom, in federal court. He is expecting that that case is going to go forward, and that case, of course, aimed to stop the Prop 50 maps from going into effect that were passed by California voters just last fall in the special Prop 50 election, which allows new maps to go into effect for this year's June primary and the November election. It was our mid-decade redistricting effort in response to Texas's mid-decade redistricting effort last summer. And David Tongipa's lawsuit aimed to stop those maps from going into effect. So he talked to me about what that lawsuit looks like now.
Madeline, during this GOP convention, Ted Cruz, Texas Republican U.S. Senator there, what were some of the things that he had to say to get the Republicans in California ramped up?
Well, he called the press professional liars who are fundamentally dishonest. He also made fun of Democrats and called the Democratic Party the party of the rich, and implied that Democrats, voters, and politicians don't really want to work. So there were some jokes at the taxpayer or jokes at the Democrats' expense. But he also talked about a number of issues that national Republican lawmakers are focused on, including curbing illegal immigration, which they've had some success at, and stopping drug overdose deaths, which is something that has, of course, been a big priority for Republicans in D.C. and in Sacramento. And he talked about tax cuts too. And of course, tomorrow being tax day, April 15th, he talked about the refunds that people are going to get because of all of the tax breaks that Republicans in D.C. have instituted as part of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, or H.R. 1.
Something else, though, that you wrote about this past week for the GOP convention in California, no endorsements going to any of the GOP candidates for governor. Is that just because the voters haven't had their say yet?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. The delegates that gathered at the convention this past weekend voted on who to endorse for certain statewide elected positions. One of those, of course, was governor. And the two big frontrunners for the Republican Party out here were Chad Bianco and Steve Hilton. And each candidate would have had to get 60% of the delegate votes to get the Republican Party's endorsement for governor. Neither one got that 60% threshold. Bianco got 49% and Hilton got 44%. So they ended up not endorsing either candidate. And Corinne Rankin, the chairwoman of the California Republican Party, said at the convention on Sunday morning that the California Republican Party has an amazing candidate problem. So it's interesting that neither candidate really got that endorsement from the state's Republican Party. So we'll see who voters really side with in the primary in June.
Now, Maddie, as we're talking here, I'm in Illinois, Democrat-dominated state. You're in California, Democrat-dominated state. I know in Illinois, the Republicans don't really have that much power, being in the super minority. What's it like in California? Where are Republicans at in their ability to make things happen at the state house, or even on a local level for taxpayers to get some relief in this election year?
Well, I think their impact is pretty limited. There are a number of bills that were introduced in the California legislature this year that aim to suspend the state's gas tax, which is one of the highest in the country, if not the highest. And at least one bill aims to make it easier for first-time home buyers to buy a house. So there's some bills that were introduced this year that are tackling the affordability issue in California. But we'll see if some of those bills pass. A couple of them are being heard in committee this week. One has already failed in committee that would have suspended the state's gas tax. One other bill that is very similar that would suspend the state's gas tax for 1 year is still being heard in committee in the coming weeks. But I don't know if much of those bills introduced by Republicans are going to pass. So we'll see how successful the Republican Party is out here in the legislature in California.
Well, Madeline, greatly appreciate you taking the time and for your reporting. We'll definitely check back in all the way from the West Coast, joining us from California, and interesting to see what's happening out there.